Hi everyone, I hope you had a great time already at the Next.js conference, and I have actually no doubt that you did. I am here today to talk about scalable apps without the hassle, super important, with Next.js, Vercel and FaunaDB. I'm here today with Wyne. So let's quickly introduce me and my guest. I'm Brecht, which is quite impossible to pronounce in another language, but okay. I'm a developer advocate at FaunaDB, and I have here with me Wyne, or at least virtually with me, Wyne from Commission Buddies, who is a senior software engineer there. And Wyne is going to provide his unique insights on why they chose FaunaDB and how that actually fit in a Next.js Vercel application and how that worked out pretty well for them. Before we go there and before I hand it over to Eric, I would love to give an introduction how FaunaDB actually fits in the Jamstack. And the first insight, which is actually not rocket science at all, is that there are two sides to web development. Backend and frontend, all very familiar to us. But when they dream about the ideal architecture or the ideal way of developing applications or what they don't want to worry about, they actually dream of very similar things. They want low latency everywhere so that their clients have a great user experience. And before they have clients, they want pay-as-you-go because you don't have clients yet, so you want to start developing, you want your application to be live, but it might not be used that much yet, and you don't want to pay for what you don't use. And once those clients arrive, you ideally want an auto-scaling feature. You want your application to automatically, seamlessly scale without you having to worry about. That's the key of this presentation. You don't want to worry about this. That means no operations. You don't have to worry about servers, or don't want to worry about servers, to provide the three other features that you might want. And when we look at today, why do you want these things? Well, basically so you can focus on the things that matter. Focus on performance, in the case of backend, algorithms, APIs, features. In the case of frontend, visuals and interactions that are just great, so they will actually provide you with the clients that you need. The insights are, we want these things, but if we want to do these things ourselves and want to implement all the necessary things there, those are complex things. And these are actually not things that are specific to your applications. The beautiful thing today is that we already have a solution. This dream has become reality, and we have serverless, we have Jamstack, and we have Next.js plus Vercel, who seamlessly integrates these two things in a great developer experience. You have serverless functions with Vercel that you get by just dropping a function in a folder, and you get static generation with Next.js that you can deploy on the Vercel CDN that gives you the low latency that your applications need. But what if my data is dynamic? In that case, what do I do? The question is, if you are building, for example, a social network for professionals, you need a search, you need ordering by profile, you need ordering by name. Your clients are actually going to enter data faster than you can follow. In that case, you typically need a database. And you might wonder, from the moment you use a database, do you still have this low latency, no operations, auto scale, pay as you go? Do you have the consistency that issues that might come with databases? Is your data secure? Do you have data security built in your database? Do you have to manage connections? Since typically database keeps connections open, how does it work from a serverless functions or multiple serverless functions? There's a limit in the amount of collections. Well, in that case, you might think, if you start to wonder about that, the dream completely shatters. I need dynamic data. I can't really use a Jamstack application, or I can build an application with the Jamstack philosophy. That is not true. There are databases, and of course, I'm going to introduce to you FaunaDB today. And FaunaDB actually fits in perfectly as the heart of those Jamstack applications. It fits in perfectly because it offers the same kind of things that a Jamstack or a serverless environment provides. It is provides low latency because it's globally distributed. You don't have to think about servers or setup. It's auto-scaling, pay-as-you-go, and all these things that are introduced by databases like consistency. Is my data still correct if I write from two different if I write to the same document with two people at the same time from a different location on the globe? Does it have data security and things like that? Well, FaunaDB has that built in, data security layer. It is consistent, you don't have to worry about these things, and it's connectionless. It actually is an API. So the A in Jamstack is actually the database FaunaDB, for example, if you want dynamic data. Because it's basically an HTTPS API that you send a query to with a token. As I mentioned, it's global, so it behaves a bit like a CDN, only for very, very, very dynamic data. If your users are going to access your application from a certain place in the world, then that will access the FaunaDB instance that is closest to that user. It just works. FaunaDB is actually a great fit for a Jamstack application for the A in Jamstack. But I have explained that, but I didn't really explain what it provides as functionality. So let's quickly dive into that, and then I'll hand over to Eric. So what is FaunaDB actually? It's a database. What kind of database? I would call it an index document database. So a document database, it means you're going to express your data in FaunaDB just as documents. It looks very much like JSON as you're used with document databases. It's indexed. That means what does it mean? Every database is probably indexed, but what does indexed mean in the case of FaunaDB? It means that you can index everything whenever and however you want. That's typically not the case in scalable databases, in the sense that often you have to choose, I want to index this field and this field beforehand, and afterwards you can change it in scalable databases. In FaunaDB you can do that whenever you want. You can index by term, by multiple terms, by terms and values. The unicorn is there, sparkles. The unicorn indicates everything that is quite unique, that you might not expect that is unique in a scalable database. If you wonder about model, what kind of model is FaunaDB? You have relational, temporal, graph database, you have document database, which we already mentioned that FaunaDB is kind of document database. Well, FaunaDB is a mix of everything. It's relational, so you can express relations. You can do joins in FaunaDB. It's also a bit temporal in the sense that you have versioning in FaunaDB, and you can actually access that versioning, which is pretty cool, as you will see. So you imagine that you have versions of the same document. In this case, it's a kind of tweet. We will keep all versions when the document updates, if you want us to, and then you can say, let's query our database and do a query as if the database was still in the state of a month ago. This is perfectly possible in FaunaDB. Is something not a lot of databases actually provide, so it's very, very unique. And with that temporality feature, you can also, for example, get a stream of change events. So you would get the initial object and the updates and things like that, which might be very cool to feed data into another system, get UI updates and things like that. When you think about UI updates, you might wonder, okay, is Fauna then a real-time database? Well, not yet, but we're actually just released beta features for streaming, which would give you the push-based updates as well. So I think that's pretty exciting, right? Besides of that, we're also a bit graph-like in the sense that you can express graph-like queries. In this case, we give you an example with query composability to give you a friend of a friend of a friend example of a query. And another typical thing that requires these kind of queries, if you can guess, is GraphQL. For the people who guessed correctly, great. That means we can actually offer both FQL and GraphQL. FQL is the Fauna query language, as well as GraphQL out of the box. In FaunaDB, you would use FQL for the very advanced queries, and Eric Wyne would actually give you a few very advanced examples of that, or not specifically the queries, but use cases. So I'm not going to go into detail for that. As mentioned, FaunaDB is a bit like a CDN. It's distributed, so you have low latencies wherever your client is, and at the same time is limitlessly scalable. When we think about scalability, Well, it's not the first graph in the sense that you will not get blocked at a certain moment. It's also not the second graph. Very common what scalable databases do. They provision a certain amount of capacity for you. And once you reach that capacity, because suddenly you have a lot of users and suddenly the capacity has to raise very quickly, they can't keep up with that demand. And you would actually have a period, for example, of half an hour or an hour where your users are blocked and don't get access to your application. That might be crucial to gaining new users when you release something, an epic article about your product, for example. In FaunaDB's case, completely seamless scaling. So you should always scale up and down seamlessly, whether there's a peak load or not. At the same time, pay as you go, and we have a generous free tier, so your usage would actually be the actual usage, the actual queries that are performed by your users minus the free tier. Assets and transactionality. It's a super interesting topic and super important database, and Eric is actually going to give you a few details on why they found that super important, so I'm not going to go into details here. However, if you are interested in what, why and how, search for CSS Tricks Consistent Backends and UX. We have a complete series that explains you why this is important, how FaunaDB actually solves this for you. Finally, it's just you just log in, you create a database, and that's all you need to get started. That's basically the idea, and it will probably give you a demo at the end of the presentation. Change of scenery, enough of my rambling about what FaunaDB is, which is of course super important to determine what features you actually need from a database. But let's look at how Eric selected FaunaDB, what he values in it, and how he uses it together with Next.js, and how that actually worked out for them.
Thanks so much, Brecht. And hi, my name is Eric Wyne. I am a senior engineer at Commission Buddies, and I am so excited to be with all of you here today at Next.js Conf, and I am learning so much. I hope you guys are learning a lot as well. Today I'm hoping to dive in from the perspective of a user of Fauna, and Brecht talked about what Fauna is, and I'm going to talk about why we chose to go with Fauna, and then how to use Fauna with Next.js. And so first, a bit of company background about us, Commission Buddies. We were founded in 2017. My CEO and I actually were running an in-home tutoring company before this, and found out about the credit card processing that we were doing for our business. Found out that there was still a guy making thousands of dollars a month on our account for his commission, having set us up years and years before, and not providing really any more value to us. And so that was so frustrating that we were just trying to grow our business and having those profits siphoned away, that we started our own credit card processing company and flipped the script where you become your own rep on your own account. And so we pay you the commission on your own account, and so that somebody else isn't getting it. And so we're excited to be the payment processor that pays you. And we've got a pretty unique offering in that way. And so if you're interested in that, feel free to click the link. And that's just a bit of who we are and what we do. As we were building out our application from the ground, we just had a couple requirements we needed. We needed to move fast. We needed a flexible architecture because this was a new space for us. And so I needed to be able to try something and fail and try again. We were definitely looking to be able to scale quickly and to pay as you go. And being in financial transactions, we needed security to be utmost of importance. And we also needed to be able to store in a database in a transactional way. And just as an example, kind of why that is the case, we're going to look at what happens when I am accruing commissions from merchants. We have a hierarchical structure of merchants where merchants are able to refer merchants and become part owners of the merchants that they refer as well. And so if I'm accruing a commission for merchant E, I then I'm adding to merchant E's account and to merchant C and to merchant B and to merchant A. And so I need to be able to store those relationships in a database. And then as I'm accruing those commissions, I need all of those accruals to happen atomically. I can't have it work for E and C, but not B and A, and find myself in an inconsistent place in my database. And so having ACID compliance was vital for us as we were designing this system. The first thing we considered was using Meteor.js. I am the engineer I am today because of Meteor.js. I'm so grateful for the work that they've done. But we've run into some scalability issues before, and it just didn't have the transactional database we were looking for. And so it wasn't the solution for us as we were building out Commission Buddies. And so we did land on using Next.js and hosting it on Now. And we just found that to be the sweet spot for us, where we were able to achieve everything we were looking for. We loved the serverless model and just all that provided for us. The scalability was just incredible. And especially the developer experience was amazing with version 9. With API routes that came out, we no longer needed to think about API routes separate from the client. And it just was a rocket ship for our speed of development. And I'm so grateful for the team at Next.js for building that out. But you'll notice there are still 2 question marks here. And the question marks there are, but what about the data? Next.js isn't opinionated about how you store your data or how you get your data. And so I still needed to find a solution where we could have security be primary and where we could store in a transactional way. And so first we considered MongoDB. We had a lot of experience with it, but had come up against some scalability issues. It wasn't transactional, and we would have had to have built out our own authentication and authorization. And so that wasn't for us. We also considered DynamoDB. DynamoDB seems just incredibly scalable. It's built for Amazon scale. But what we found is that if you don't understand your access patterns, it's hard to wrap your brain around how to organize a Dynamo database. And so with us being new in this space, we weren't exactly sure what access patterns would look like. And so that wasn't the solution for us. We briefly looked into Firebase. To be honest, I didn't look that deeply into it. It seems like it's an incredible product and could have been a great fit, but my understanding is that we didn't have the ability to store transactions in the database in that way. And so we ended up using FaunaDB, and it was just a natural fit where it was able to give us everything we were looking for. It had security built in, and it had globally distributed transactions, and was built specifically for serverless. And it's just exactly what we were looking for. And so we ended up going with FaunaDB. In making that decision, we also found that it was purpose-built for serverless. It had built-in temporality, so you can, like Brecht said, you can go back in time and you can say, what was the state of my database a week ago, a month ago, a year ago? It had hands-free geo-distribution, so it had anywhere you are in the world, it'll find the closest data center and use that. It has 2 different ways to query the database, a built-in GraphQL API, and then a super powerful specific query language, Fauna query language that they've created, which once you are able to wrap your head around it, just has unleashed so much power for us. And then also currently in beta, I am so excited. They just released real-time streaming from the database. And so this is huge for the serverless environment because it means that it unlocks a whole new world of possibilities of what we can do with receiving push data to the client. And so if you're interested in that, reach out to the team on Slack. They're looking for beta testers. I could not be more excited about the world of opportunities that real-time streaming with Fauna is going to open up. And so we decided we were going to use Next.js with Fauna, and let's go. And if you want to do the same, we're going to look into kind of how to combine these 2 technologies together. The first thing you're going to need to do after you choose that you're going to go with Fauna is you need to decide whether you're going to use FQL or you're going to use GraphQL. GraphQL is it's amazing from Fauna. You just provide a schema to them using an SDL, and they'll build out all the CRUD operations you need. And if you're already using GraphQL, if you're curious about GraphQL, I encourage you to check that out. Brecht has great content out there. Here in the slides, I'll link to the slides as a video of him talking about how to use that. It's great. It's amazing. It actually didn't exist when I started building with Commission Buddies, and so we're using FQL, and now that I'm using it, I just recognize the power that it has and everything you can do with it. And so that's what we're going to look at today, is how to use FQL in Next.js. First thing you want to do after you've decided that is you're going to go ahead and create an account. It is free to sign up. You don't need to add a credit card, and there is a truly generous free tier. I did all of our development building out our application all entirely within the free tier. And it's just amazing. There's no reason to not sign up and give it a try. And so sign in here on their dashboard and then create your first database. All you need to do to create a database is just give it a name and you're good to go. And then this is kind of what the dashboard looks like. And it's a very powerful tool that the team at Fauna has built out and is well worth just taking a look. It really intuitively teaches you how Fauna works, how they think about collections and documents and indexes, and their security model. And it's just the right place to start is by using this UI to get a sense for kind of how everything is structured within Fauna. In this example, we're going to create a new collection. And to create a collection, all you need to do is give it a name, give it how long you want to record the history that we were talking about. And so you can, if you leave it empty, it'll store the history forever. Or if you only care about the last week's worth of changes and updates, you can set that to 7 days. You can also they have built-in TTL so that if you only want a document to stay around for a certain amount of time, you can put that right in the collection level, or you can do it at a document level. And that's just a great use case, but we're going to leave it blank in this example. To create a document in the dashboard, it's super simple. You're just putting in JSON and clicking save. And so here we're going to create a user document with a handle, and I'm going to use my handle there. It's ECWyne. And so just enter that JSON and click save, and you're good to go. And so then we're looking at the collections. Here we've got the users collection and our ECWyne document. And here what I want to take note of is that on the right side there, it creates an ID, a numeric ID for each document. And we're just going to copy that, and we're going to use that later, but just wanted to show there that it creates an ID for each document. Here we want to take a look at FQL and kind of how it works. And so FQL is a query builder. And so it is a collection of functions that you use in your JavaScript code. And so here is the same thing that we just did in the dashboard. We're going to take the data this is just a JSON object with handle ECWyne. And then here's the first bit of FQL, where there's a function within FQL called the collection. And so you just say collection and give it a name, give it that name, and that'll be a reference to the user's collection. And then here you can use that user's collection and build up this query using the power of JavaScript to build out the query as you want. So here we're calling create on the user's collection, and we're going to pass in that data. And so you can see how you can use your knowledge of JavaScript to build out complex queries however you want. You can use logic like ifs, you can map over, you can do whatever you want and construct this query and then send the completed query to the database all as one query. Is kind of how FQL works. If JavaScript isn't, if you need other languages as well, they've got libraries in all these languages directly from Fauna. I believe there are also some community-supported languages as well. But just know that if your team also has any other needs, these are also provided. As you're learning FQL, I cannot encourage you enough to take a look at the Fauna docs. They have this FQL cheat sheet I have bookmarked in my browser. I reference it all the time. It is just an amazing source of information about all the different functions within FQL that you can call. And this is just the place to go. I encourage you, go to docs.fauna.com, go to the FQL cheat sheet, and that'll be the best place to learn and then reference moving forward as far as what different arguments are needed for each function and how to use them, and that's just the place to go. And here, using the Fauna shell, we're going to have the first time we're going to use this FQL. And so here in the bottom, we're calling q.update. So we're calling the update function. We're going to update a document. To update a document, you pass a reference. So we've got a reference to this user's collection and the specific document ID that I pointed out earlier. And here we're going to pass in a credentials object with a password. And Fauna has the idea of credentials built in. And so I can set a password on this user document and then use that password to authenticate against that document in the future. And that password is hashed and stored correctly on Fauna's side. And they'll provide a secret that you can use to authenticate against that specific document. And then the results here in the shell come up here. So we'll see that document returned. And then as you hover over this icon right here, it gives you all the details about that query. So it tells you how much bandwidth it took, how many read and write operations it took, and how much storage that is associated with, because Fauna has a serverless pricing model where you only pay for what you use. And so the shell is a great place to try queries out and see how much you're using and kind of fine tune those queries and just kind of test in a test environment. Here in the shell is just the right place to do it. It's just a great opportunity to do that. The last thing we're going to do in the dashboard is we're going to create an index. And the way to think about an index is that it's essentially a hash table of your collection or an object of your collection. So it's mapping over your entire collection, and you give it what keys and what values so that you're organizing the collections into groups. And so in this example, we're organizing the documents by the handle within that data. And so here we're just saying on the user's collection, we're going to name this index user by handle so that we can look up a user by their handle. And then we're going to click here. We've got uniqueness set. So another thing you can do within an index is you can guarantee in this index that no two user documents will have the same handle. And that's great because you can't have two users with the same username or same handle. And that functionality is built in right here in the index. And so it's an impossibility. If you try and set another document to have the same handle, it'll error out and it won't work. And so enough of the dashboard. Let's go ahead and jump into some code and see how we would use Fauna with Next.js. To do so, you're going to use the Fauna client, the client from the Fauna library. And you can see here that all you need to do is you pass a secret in to the client. And so whether you're using this client on the server, in the browser, it doesn't matter. If you get the client a secret, you can then use that secret to perform queries. And the shape of that query is you then take that client and you call query and pass in any arbitrary query you want, and that returns a promise. And so a very familiar API to use. It just returns a promise of exactly what you requested. And so where do you get that key? In the dashboard, we're going to create a server key, and a server key has access to read and write all of the collections, update, delete, everything you want to do. And so this would be a secret key that you would only use on the server, because it has all of those privileges. And so we'll create a key doing that. We'll give it a name. And doing so is going to spit out then this string of a secret. And so you want to make sure you copy that, and we're going to put that into our code. And so first, let's head into the server using Next.js. We're going to create a file, pages/api/login.ts. And so we're going to make an API route here for a login. So you're going to provide a handle and a password, and we're going to give you a secret specific to that user document. And so here, we're going to create a client on the server. We're going to pass that secret that we just created into the client and instantiate that client. We're going to take the request body of this API route. We're going to grab the handle and the password. And then here we're going to start writing some FQL. So we're going to match on that index. So we use the match function on that index we just created called user by handle, and we're going to match that handle. And so if the handle matches EC_Wyne, that's going to return for us a reference to that specific user. And then we're going to take that matched user and call the login function. And the login function takes two arguments. It takes the reference to that user that we're matching by handle and the password. And under the assumption that if those two match, if the user exists and the password matches, then we'll get a promise that returns the secret, and we're just going to send that secret back down to the client so that we can use that that secret on the client. And it's important to note that that client secret only has the privileges that you provide to that user. And so Fauna has a role-based access control system that is kind of out of the purview of this talk, but is very powerful, and you can, with great precision, control and provide the secure authorization and authentication necessary to limit the scope of what's available to the client. And that's why we can pass the secret directly to the client and do queries directly from the client. And so now we're going to go ahead and hop down to the client and see how we're going to use this client from the browser. And that is all going to be found in these 22 lines of code. Is a simple way to do any arbitrary query directly from the client. And we're going to zoom into, this is the goal. This is what we're going to create, is we're going to create a use identity hook that's going to return to us the data of our identity, any error that might occur, and a Boolean of whether or not it is validating. And you may recognize this API because we're going to use these technologies. We're going to use FaunaDB, and of course, at Next.js Conf, we're going to use the incredible library SWR from Vercel, and that's going to take care of a whole heck of a lot of the logic as far as the is validating any errors and revalidating on focus and all that kind of stuff. And I'm also here going to use a global state library zoostand here just because it's simple. It lives outside of the React tree, and so you don't need to deal with providing a provider in the app.js. This just exists outside of the React tree and is accessible everywhere, and so it's just useful in this example. We're going to go ahead and create a store using zoostand. It's a very simple one. All we've got is a secret that's a string. And then we're going to create a login function. And so this isn't specifically a hook, but this is just a function that can be used anywhere where you pass a handle and a password. And we're going to fetch that API route we just created and pass in the JSON with the handle and the password. And if those two match, we're going to receive back a text secret. And so we're going to grab that secret and put that in our global store. And so we now have that accessible anywhere that we want. We can use that state in our zoostand store. And then here's where the magic happens. So we're creating here a use query hook where we're going to pass in any arbitrary query that we want from SQL. First, we're going to grab that secret from the global store, and we're going to create an SWR key. And so if we have a secret, we're going to have an array of arguments here where we've got the secret and the stringified query. And if we don't have a secret, we're just going to return null, because if you don't have a secret, there's no use hitting the database because you have nothing to authenticate against. And so with this, anytime the secret changes, if you log in using a different account, if you log out and get rid of that secret, it'll update all of your SWR queries automatically. Or if the string of the query here changes, then it'll also update the query. And so all of that is just going to work for us with SWR. And finally here, we're going to call use SWR with that provided key. And then we're going to give here a fetcher function where, given a secret, we're going to instantiate a client using that secret and call that query. And that's going to return a promise. And that's all we need to do. And so the power of that here is we're going to make our use identity hook. And with it, we're going to call use query with two FQL functions here. Q.identity returns the reference to the currently authenticated user given a secret. And then get here is going to read that document from the database. So it's going to get the current status of that document from the database. And what's also amazing about being able to do these queries directly from the client is no matter where you are, it's going to read from the nearest data center. And so you've got low latency reads and writes from wherever you are. And then also the reason to do it from the client is with real-time rolling out, we're going to be able to use get real-time updates on the client directly from the database. And so having the power to be able to do queries directly from the client is how you want to do this. And it's amazing to be able to put in any arbitrary query you want and to just get those results. And I've built incredibly complex queries where you can read every document from a collection and do updates, do deletes, do all of that sort of stuff, and it all commits atomically. And you can do that all here from the browser using Fauna with Next.js, and that's how you would go about doing so. If you're interested in setting any of this stuff up, I encourage you to check out these links. Go to the Fauna dashboard, read the Fauna docs. If you're interested in my company, Commission Buddies, head to commissionbuddies.com. If you want to sign up, if you're in the United States, go ahead and head to that link. We'd love to work with you. And then I've got the slides here hosted on Vercel. And feel free to share those around as well. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share with you guys what it looks like to use Next.js with FaunaDB. Thanks so much.
And back to the FaunaDB studio or something like that. Before we leave you, I wanted to give you a quick introduction to an application called Twitter, where we actually use FQL to compose into very, very advanced queries. So we will look at these queries and show you what FQL can do for you. The application allows you to log in, show a feed of tweets, you can like tweets, you can comment on tweets, you can tweet yourself, you can retweet if you would want to, you can search, you can follow people, you can select a specific tag and search for that or a specific person. For example, if we click on a retweet button, what happens behind the scenes, a lot of things are happening. And I don't think you need to understand everything in this query. What is important is that we see how many things we are doing and how easy it is to combine these things in FQL. When we zoom out and look at this query, we have composed a lot of things in one query. And as we will see, this is not even the whole query. Composition is magic in FQL. We retrieve data from multiple collections, accounts, users, tweets, tweet stats, follower stats. Then in the query, we just use a plain if test to verify if someone already retweeted this, because we only allow this once. In case we're allowed to retweet, we create the tweet statistics to color the icon or update it if they already exist. And what you saw here is not only video editing, the dashboard actually updates real time when new data arrives or is updated, which is something you can do with the upcoming stream features. And then we actually create the tweet, link it to the original tweet, link it to the author. Then we update the retweets on the original tweet to keep statistics, and we update the follower statistics. And that all in one query that will either be completely executed or not at all. So you always have your data in a consistent state. And remember when Eric showed this slide, this is exactly what we're talking about. Everything in one query and it executes completely, else in some applications money might go lost. And then there's one part of the query that we actually didn't explain, which is actually just a JavaScript function. Composition, as I said, is magic in FaunaDB. This JavaScript function contains just another query, a query that we reuse everywhere to get exactly the same results every time, which is super hard to do in many query languages. Finally, this might all sound cool, but maybe you don't need that kind of power and actually want ease of use. In that case, we also have GraphQL, and the only thing you need to do is create a new database, import a schema, and you actually have a GraphQL endpoint that you can start using that is scalable and global. And at the same time, you don't have to choose. You can actually use FQL to update your data and use GraphQL to query. We might not have a lot of time for Q&A today, but that's okay, because we have a FaunaDB booth here today, where I will also be present explaining whatever you want me to explain about FaunaDB. We can jump on a call and answer your questions further there.